Morning, I'm Rory and welcome back to Sawyer Academy. In this video we are going to be talking about the differences between MOF and BOF. This is more of a supplement video to set up for the next two videos coming up, in which we're going to talk about these individually. This video is just going to cover the differences between the two. So what MOF is your minimum opening face, and your BOF is your best opening face. These are really your two main options when you start cutting a log. So after your first cut, your slab is removed, and what you're left with is a log with an opening face. And what that opening face is either a best opening face, a minimum opening face, or in, let's say, old school sawmills or portable sawmills, you're more eyeballing it. The downside to eyeballing it is that either your cuts can be too shallow and you're not going to get a board, or it's going to be too deep and you could have gotten a board. It's hard to hit that sweet spot. So for today's purposes, we're really talking about commercial band mills, as well as you're probably going to be running some kind of computer optimizer. That's either going to be a 2D scanner or a 3D optimizer. For today's purposes, we're only going to be talking about phase 1 and phase 2 and making a cant out of a log based off a standard rotation. So we cut phase 1, we cut phase 2, and we're left with a cant. For this purpose, phase 1 and phase 3 and phase 2 and phase 4 can be thought of the same way we apply taper the same to phase 1 and phase 3. This is going to apply phase 3 and phase 4 similarly based on what you're doing, but to keep things simple, we're only talking about making a cant out of phase 1 and phase 2. So let's look at our first option. So in our first option is what you're usually going to see for hardwoods, all hardwoods. So whether that's poplar, that's maple, it's going to give you your best grade, your best recovery on select lumber. This is going to apply for hardwood lumber or timbers, it doesn't really matter. It's also going to give you your best volume as long as you're not cutting shims. And what I mean by that is, let's say after a phase 1 and 2, we're left with a cant size that's going to be 10 3/4 inches. Well, if we can't sell 10 3/4 inches, either the head saw or the resaw is going to have to cut that 10 3/4 down to 10 1/8. That would be cutting a shim. You're going to lose a 5/8 shim, and that's going to be waste. That's going to take away from your volume. So that's not necessarily your best volume anymore, but it still will be your best grade, and you typically see that in hardwood. Now what this will leave you with at the end is going to be an MOF on phase 1, MOF on phase 2, and you'll be left with an indeterminate cant size or a random width cant. So again, that'll be 6 3/4, 10 3/4, 11 1/8, 12 1/2. It doesn't matter. It's going to be random. It's whatever you're left with at the end. Now let's take a look at option number 2. In the second option is what you're going to typically use for softwood lumber when you're using a 2D scanner, or when you're using a 2D scanner in general. Off of phase 1, you're going to use an MOF, but on phase 2, you're going to use a BOF. And what that's going to give you is, at the end, is going to give you a determinate cant size. So that's going to be your 6 1/8, 8 1/8, 12 1/4, whatever it is. That's going to be known, and that's not going to be changed later on. And in our last option, we're going to be using a BOF on phase 1 and phase 2, and that's going to be used for softwood timbers. It's also going to give you your best value, and you'll see it most oftenly used in 3D optimizers. So a 3D optimizer is going to consider the whole log all at one time before you start cutting and apply the best cutting solution to that log. With best value, what I mean by that is not necessarily your highest grade. So the most money you can get out of a log is usually going to be selling the most select lumber off that log. So that's all your sapwood off the outside. So that's why with this, we want to maximize our minimum opening face to yield the highest grade or the most amount of high grade lumber. What best value means has nothing to do with grade. It has nothing whether you're selling select or number 4, it doesn't matter. What this means is inside the computer, each product that you sell, 1x3, 6/4 6, 6x6, you'll assign a $sign to that product that you sell to your customers or your clients. And from that log, the computer is going to say, what's the most amount of dollars I can cut out of this log? And that's where your best value is. So that's going to be the difference between cutting, let's say, one 8x8 and 4 slabs, or 4 boards and a 6x6. You can do the same out of the same dimension log, but it's what's going to be most valuable to your customer. Not taking grade into consideration is an important distinction. Now, a couple things to add on to this is that even with 2D scanners can use a BOF off of face 1 and face 2. The way they can work is they only see your first face, but they can interpret what the second face will be, or what it looks like, and what the actual dimension of the log is. And from there, it can act as a 3D scanner. The difference will be, at least in my experience, a 3D scanner will get this right 99 times out of 1,000. It's going to get one log right or one log wrong every 1,000 logs. A 2D scanner trying to do a BOF and a BOF is probably going to get it wrong once every 10 logs. So in that situation, you as the Sawyer will just have to kind of negate what the computer's telling you and apply a better solution to that log. As well, you don't need a 3D or really even a 2D scanner to use BOF at all. When we're talking about, earlier when we were talking about just eyeballing the log of where to start, as long as you're experienced and you know kind of what you're doing, you can use a BOF without any computer at all. And what I mean by that is, first off, you need to do what's called knowing your numbers. And what knowing your numbers is knowing the diameter of your log, whether that's the tape measure or a readout of some kind. You can figure out what you're going to do with that log based off what it looks like and based off how much material you have left. That probably doesn't make sense if you're not experienced, but once you kind of get the hang of it, you can say, I have 9 3/4 inches left. I can skinny out an 8x8. I can do a 6x6 with maybe 2 boards based on the sweep. So from that, if you know what prices you're selling things at, kind of gets complicated. My point being, you can use BOF without any kind of scanner. As long as you're aware of what BOF is, and again, we're gonna cover that in a future video, you don't need a scanner. Don't let the scanner thing throw you off. You can still use MOF, you can still use BOF, regardless of what equipment you have. So an example of that, what I'm talking about, is let's say you have this log right here on a portable sawmill, no scanner. What you can do is, let's say you have a plywood template of an 8x8. What you can do is take that plywood template, put it on the end of your log, your small in diameter, on the end of your log, trace that plywood template onto the end of the log, and that's where you're going to make your 4 cuts. Yeah, are you going to get the best recovery? No, not by a long shot. Your slabs are going to be probably way too heavy, but the point being is your best value. That 8x8 that you're going to cut out of here, somebody's going to come buy that for $200 or $150 or $100 or whatever. That's going to be the most value. Your other option was going to be, oh, I was just going to kind of plain saw it the whole way through and hope to sell live edge lumber. I have a customer that will come pick up 8x8s. I don't have a customer right now that wants live edged 4/4 inch boards. So that's going to be kind of, again, what we talked about at the start is considering the best option at the log at the start. So the same thing the computer does, scans the log, says, what can I do with this? You as an experienced Sawyer can stand there, look at this log and say, what can I do with this? It's the same thing. The computer just makes the decision in a fraction of a second. So far in my career and in my experience, I've used 3D scanners. I've used no scanners. No scanners being the minimum requirement is just a laser mounted on the roof, and you see your saw line and you know where you're going to cut. That's the slowest option. A 2D scanner is going to speed you up, and a 3D scanner is going to probably speed you up even more. Now, for me, the sweet spot is going to be right here, this second option. It's going to be using a 2D scanner and what I call computer-assisted sawing. So the computer is going to make your taper. It's going to maybe give you a solution. It's going to set your MOF or your BOF, but mostly your MOF. And from there, you as a Sawyer can decide, yes, that computer made the right decision, let's go with it. Or if you're trying to do this, the computer got it wrong. The computer, a 2D scanner, when it gets wrong, it gets it really wrong. So you're like, okay, computer's not gonna get this log. I have to cut this one manually. So that's what I'm talking about with computer assisted sawing. And what I like about this, an MOF off your first face, a BOF off your second face, you're left with dimensioned lumber, a determinate cant. It's also, for me, the fastest, because when the computer makes that mistake, I gotta really stop and say, okay, I gotta clear a bunch of things out of the computer, I gotta change the taper, whatever I have to do to fix that. This overall makes a smoother process for a 9-hour shift or whatever it is. As well, the second option is a good balance between your best value and your best volume. Now with a 2D scanner, you're probably not going to be considering value in terms of dollars per product. You are probably going to be more inclined, you as a Sawyer or you as the owner, as you as the manager, are going to be more inclined to be getting the best grade and the best volume. So that kind of shifts you higher into MOF. Again, the downside to, well, why don't I just run MOF all of the time? The downside to running MOF all of the time, your minimum opening face all of the time, is this, what you're left with, this indeterminate cant size. If you have to, let's say we apply an MOF to face 1, 2, 3, and 4, we're going to be left with a 9 3/4 by 10.5. We can't sell a 9 3/4 by 10.5 timber. We can sell 6 by 6. We can sell 1 by 8s, but we can't sell 9 3/4 and 10.5 inch lumber. So what do we do with that? Okay, now it's got to go to the resaw if we have a resaw, and it has to be, we have to cut this shim. We have to cut that shim off of it. We're wasting time, we're wasting material. So I don't like to do that. I like to, and again, we're going to cover this in the next video of what MOF actually is. It's just important to note that there is a balance between all three of these, and you're not necessarily limited based on the technology or the capabilities that you have. You're more limited on you, the Sawyer, the capabilities of you as a Sawyer, as to what you can make out of this. But that's enough. That's enough of that. So thank you for watching, and leave any questions you have down below, and I'll see you next time.